Hi friends, we're back today to read The Tale of Desperaux by Kate DiCamillo. We are going to start today on chapter 10. So we've read a lot already. If you can tell that we have a lot of characters talking a lot, but a lot of times this book is told by the narrator. Whenever you hear that word reader, the narrator is talking to you to try and get you thinking about the book a little bit. The last time we read, we learned a new word called perfidy. I wonder if you looked up what perfidy meant. It means to be untrustworthy or kind of deceitful. So sometimes not always being honest, kind of like telling lies. Does that happen in fairy tales a lot? What do you guys think? I think so. All right, we're going to start today with chapter 10, and it is called Good Reasons. The entire mouse community, as instructed by the very honored head mouse, had gathered behind the wall of the castle ballroom. The members of the Mouse Council sat atop 3 bricks piled high, and spread out before them was every mouse, old and young, foolish and wise, who lived in the castle. They were all waiting for Desperaux. "Make way," said Furlough. "Here he is. I've got him. Make way." Furlough pushed through the crowd of mice. Desperaux clung to his brother's tail. "There he is," the mice whispered. "There he is. He's so small. They say he was born with his eyes open." Some of the mice pulled away from Desperaux in disgust, and others, thrill seekers, reached out to touch him with a whisker or a paw. "The princess put a finger on him. They say he sat at the foot of the king. It is simply not done," came the distinctive voice of Desperaux's Aunt Florence. Make way, shouted Furlough. "I have him right here. I have Desperaux Tilling, who has been called to sit with the Mouse Council." He led Desperaux to the front of the room. "Honored members of the Mouse Council," shouted Furlough, "I have brought you Desperaux Tilling as you requested to sit with you." He looked over his shoulder at Desperaux. "Let go of me," Furlough said. Desperaux dropped Furlough's tail. He looked up at the members of the Mouse Council. His father met his gaze and then shook his head and looked away. Desperaux turned and faced the sea of mice. "To the dungeon!" a voice cried out. "Straight to the dungeon with him!" Desperaux's head, which had been full of such delightful phrases as happily ever after and lovely ears and "I honor you," suddenly cleared. "Straight to the dungeon!" another voice shouted. "Enough," said the most very honored head mouse. "This trial will be conducted in an orderly fashion. We have to act civilized." He cleared his throat. He said to Desperaux, "Son, turn and look at me." Desperaux turned. He looked up and into the head mouse's eyes. They were dark eyes, deep and sad and frightened. And looking into them, Desperaux's heart thudded once, twice. "Desperaux Tilling," said the head mouse. "Yes, sir," said Desperaux. "We, the 14 members of the Mouse Council, have discussed your behavior. First, we will give you a chance to defend yourself against these rumors of your egregious acts. Did you, or did you not, sit at the foot of the human king?" "I did," said Desperaux. "But I was listening to the music, sir. I was there to hear the song the king was singing." "To hear what?" "The song, sir. He was singing a song about the deep purple falling over sleepy garden walls." The head mouse shook his head. "Whatever you are talking about is beside the point. The question is this, and only this. Did you sit at the foot of the human king?" "I did, sir." The community of mice shifted their tails and paws and whiskers. They waited. "And did you allow the girl human, the princess, to touch you?" "Her name is Dee." "Never mind her name. Did you allow her to touch you?" "Yes, sir," said Desperaux. "I let her touch me. It felt good." A gasp arose from the assembled mice. Desperaux heard his mother's voice. "Mon Dieu, it is not the end of the world. It was a touch. What of it?" "It is simply not done," came Aunt Florence's voice from the crowd. "To the dungeon," said a mouse in the front row. "Silence," roared the most very honored head mouse. "Silence." He looked down at Desperaux. Do you, Desperaux, Tilling, understand the sacred, never to be broken rules of conduct for being a mouse? Yes, sir, said Desperaux. I guess so, but did you break them? Yes, sir, said Desperaux. He raised his voice, but I broke the rules for good reasons, because of music, because of love. Love, said the head mouse. Oh, Christ, said Burlow. Here we go. I love her, sir, said Desperaux. We are not here to talk about love. This trial is not about love. This trial is about you being a mouse, shouted the most very honored head mouse from high atop the bricks, and not acting like one. Yes, sir, said Desperaux. I know. No, I don't think you know. And because you do not deny the charges, you must be punished. You are to be sent, as ancient castle mouse law decrees, to the dungeon. You are being sent to the rats. That's right, shouted a mouse in the crowd. That's the ticket. The dungeon? The rats? Despereaux's small heart sank all the way to the tip of his tail. There would be no light in the dungeon, no stained glass windows, no library, and no books. There would be no Princess P. But first, said the most very honored head mouse, we will give you the chance to renounce your actions. We will allow you to go to the dungeon with a pure heart. Renounce? Repent. Say that you are sorry you sat at the foot of the human king. Say that you are sorry you allowed the human princess to touch you. Say that you regret these actions. Desperaux felt hot, and then cold, and then hot again. Renounce her? Renounce the princess? Mon Dieu, shouted his mother. Son, do not act the fool. Renounce! Repent! What say you, Desperaux, Tilling? I say, no, whispered Desperaux. What? Said the head mouse. No, said Desperaux, and this time he did not whisper the word. I am not sorry. I will not renounce my actions. I love her. I love the princess. There was a bellow of collective outrage. The whole of the mouse community surged toward Desperaux. The mice seemed to become one angry body with hundreds of tails and thousands of whiskers and one huge, hungry mouth opening and closing and opening and closing, saying over and over and over again, to the dungeon, to the dungeon, to the dungeon. The words pounded through Desperaux's body with each beat of his heart. Very well, said the most very honored head mouse. You will die then, with a black heart. Threadmaster, he called, bring out the thread. Desperaux marveled at his own bravery. He admired his own defiance, and then, reader, he fainted. We're going to go to chapter 11, The Threadmaster Cometh. When Desperaux came to, he heard the drum. His father was beating a rhythm that had much more boom and much less tat. Together, Lester and the drum produced an ominous sound that went something like this: boom, 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 tat. Boom, 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 tat. Make way for the thread, cried a mouse who was pushing a wooden spool of red thread through the crowd. Make way for the thread. Boom, 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 tat, went the drum. To the dungeon, shouted the mice. Desperaux lay on his back, blinking his eyes. How, he wondered, had things gone so terribly wrong? Wasn't it a good thing to love? In the story in the book, love was a very good thing, because the knight loved the fair maiden. He was able to rescue her. They lived happily ever after. It said so in the book. They were the last words on the page, happily ever after. Desperaux was certain that he had read exactly those words time and time again. Lying on the floor with the drum beating and the mice shouting and the threadmaster calling out, make way, Desperaux had a sudden chilling thought. Had some other mouse eaten the words that spoke the truth? Did the knight and the fair maiden really not live happily ever after? Reader, do you believe that there is such a thing as happily ever after? Or like Desperaux, have you too begun to question the possibility of happy endings? Happily ever after. whispered Desperaux, happily ever after, he said again as the spool of thread came to a stop beside him. The thread, the thread, the thread, murmured the mice. I'm sorry, said the mouse behind the spool, but I have to ask you to stand up. I have to do my job. Desperaux got slowly to his feet. On your hind legs, please, said the threadmaster. It's the rules. Desperaux stood on his hind legs. Thank you, said the mouse. I appreciate it. While Desperaux watched, the threadmaster unwound a length of red thread from the spool and tied a loop. Just enough for the neck, muttered the mouse. No more, no less. That's what the last threadmaster taught me. Enough thread for the neck. He looked up at Desperaux and then back down at the loop of thread. And you, my friend, have a small neck. The threadmaster raised his arms and put them around Despereaux's neck. He leaned in close, and Desperaux smelled celery. He could feel the threadmaster's breath in his ear as he worked at tightening the thread. Is she beautiful? The threadmaster whispered. What? Said Desperaux. Shh! Is the princess beautiful? The Princess P? Yeah. She is lovely beyond all imagining, said Desperaux. Just right, the threadmaster said. He drew back. He nodded his head. A lovely princess, just so, like a fairy tale. And you love her as a knight loves a maiden. You love her with a courtly love, a love that is based on bravery and courtesy and honor and devotion, just so. How do you know that, Desperaux? How do you know about fairy tales? Shh! The mouse leaned in close, and Desperaux smelled celery again, green and alive. Be brave, friend, whispered the threadmaster. Be brave for the princess. And then he stepped back and turned and shouted, Fellow mice, the thread has been tied. The thread has been knotted. A roar of approval went up from the crowd. Desperaux squared his shoulders. He had made a decision. He would do as the threadmaster had suggested. He would be brave for the princess, even if, reader, could it be true, there was no such thing as happily ever after. With a picture of the threadmaster and Desperaux. We'll read one more chapter today. It's chapter 12, and it's called Adieu, which is French for goodbye. The sound of the drum changed again. The final tat disappeared, and it became nothing but boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Lester used only his tail, bringing it down with great force and seriousness upon the drum. The threadmaster retreated. The room full of mice fell silent, expectant, waiting. And as Desperaux stood before them with the red thread around his neck and the 14 members of the mouse council perched on the bricks above him, 2 burly mice came forward. Black pieces of cloth covered their heads. There were slits for their eyes. We, said the bigger of the 2 mice, will escort you to the dungeon. Desperaux, Antoinette called out. Oh, my Desperaux. Desperaux looked out into the crowd of mice and saw his mother. She was easy to spot. In honor of her youngest mouse being sent to the dungeon, she had put on a tremendous amount of makeup. Each of the hooded mice put a paw on Despereaux's shoulder. It's time, said the one on the left, the first hood. Antoinette pushed her way through the crowd. He is my son, she said. I want to have a last word with my son. Desperaux looked at his mother. He concentrated on standing before her without trembling. He concentrated on not being a disappointment. Please, said Antoinette, what will happen to him? What will happen to my baby? Ma'am, said the first hood. His voice was deep and slow. You do not want to know. I want to know. I want to know. He is my child, the child of my heart, the last of my mice babies. The hooded mice said nothing. Tell me, said Antoinette. The rats, said the first. The rats, said the second. Yes, we, the rats, what of them? The rats will eat him. The second hood. Said Antoinette. Mon Dieu! At the thought of being eaten by rats, Desperaux forgot about being brave. He forgot about not being a disappointment. He felt himself heading into another faint, but his mother, who had an excellent sense of dramatic timing, beat him to it. She executed a beautiful, flawless swoon, landing right at Desperaux's feet. "Now you've done it," said the first hood. "It doesn't matter," said the second. "Step over her. We have a job to do. Nobody's mother is going to stop us. To the dungeon." "To the dungeon," repeated the first hood, but his voice, so deep and a moment ago, now shook a tiny bit. He put a paw on Desperaux and tugged him forward, and the two hoods and Desperaux stepped over Antoinette. The crowd parted. The mice began to chant, "To the dungeon, to the dungeon, to the dungeon." The drum beat continued, boom, 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 and Desperaux was led away. At the last moment, Antoinette came out of her faint and shouted one word to her child. That word, reader, was adieu. Do you know the definition of adieu? Don't bother with the dictionary, I will tell you. Adieu is the French word for farewell. Farewell is not the word that you would like to hear from your mother as you are being led to the dungeon by two oversized mice in black hoods. Words that you would like to hear are, "Take me instead. I will go to the dungeon in my son's place." There's a great deal of comfort in those words. But reader, there is no comfort in the word farewell, even if you say it in French. Farewell is a word that, in any language, is full of sorrow. It is a word that promises absolutely nothing. And that's where we'll end today. I'll read again with you guys next time. Bye.